And because we were also facing a severe, I would say, fight with the government over the past 4 years, trying to get a legal mark or a legal framework for distributed generation that actually came into place in January this year, which is the law 14300. The tariff increase was a big success, or not a big success, but it was a big communications aspect that we needed in order to get our federal Congress to approve this bill and to actually create the framework for distributed generation in the country. And as the law is coming into, I would say, coming into place, and we are starting to see it coming into effect as of 7 January next year, a key aspect that the sector is actually discussing now with the government is, given the fact that because of the last drought, we have to hire so much gas thermal plants, and those gas thermal plants are expected to keep on producing energy over the next years, at least 10 to 20 years is the contracts that were firm with them. Wouldn't it be the case for us to actually keep the net metering system for at least 1 more year before coming in force with net billing? Because as I think we were discussing in terms of subsidies and how they weight on the end consumer tariffs, we developed a study in January this year at AB Solar. And this study showed that the solar generation we have over the last year in Brazil, only with distributed generation, so taken off centralized plants that we have, solar centralized that we have, allowed the cost of the last water drought that we had to be 25% smaller than it should have been if we didn't have the distributed generation in the country. And the reason of that is because the distributed generation that we had allowed us to be able to turn off some of the coal and gas plants that we would have during peak times. And this economy itself that solar produced during the drought we had last year would be more than enough to pay, for example, for the subsidies that we saw not only in the past years from net metering, but also in the coming years. And what we expect to have is that during the next decade, if we would keep the net metering system in Brazil, what we would see is that the benefits of distributed generation in the country, looking only towards the power system, so not considering environmental aspects or social aspects or jobs being produced, for example, would be enough to bring a tariff to come down in at least 5% for all the Brazilian society, so not only for prosumers, for example. So this is the kind of study and this kind of discussion that we are going in Brazil right now. And we do believe that, as you're probably very much aware, we are just coming out of elections, and we have a left-wing party that is going to take again presidency next year. And left-wing parties historically in the country tend to have policies developed that are more oriented toward renewables and towards the environmental. Net metering system in Brazil was created in a left-wing party government. So we expect actually to have more public policies coming into place in the country for the coming years. So I think this is an overall scenario that we have for distributed generation in Brazil. If we look globally, as I've showed you, mentally, pretend there's a beautiful graph here. I'll tell you how my slide looks like. And then you need to do an exercise with me of imagining it. So you need to pay really good attention in it, okay? So you have a bar slide. See, that's because you are not doing positive thinking with me far enough. But now that you focus, it actually worked. Thank you so much for your help. Okay. Yes. So this is the bar that we were all imagining together. And then it came here. This is how solar installed capacity looks like in Brazil right now. And this is this is the amount we have so far. So we have 20 gigawatts installed capacity. And we aim at closing the year with 25 gigawatts installed capacity. An interesting number in this is that in January this year, the forecast we did at AB Solar was that we would finish the year with 22 gigawatts of installed capacity. So the pace that the market has been growing has been shown that even ourselves have been wrong in our projections, and we added 3 more gigawatts to it. But what you can see is the market has started with centralized generation, pretty much because of the auctions that we have in 2014 for centralized solar. But it quickly shifted towards distributed generation. And distributed generation, it starts to appear in 2015, 2016, which is when the tariff raises that we have because of the drought of the year actually started to make effect into everyone's tariff. So that's when, for example, solar, a distributed generation or rooftop solar payback went down from 10 years to around 5 to 6 years overall in the country. So that's when we started to see, and now distributed solar, it's actually the majority of what we have, but we still believe that this is very small number, that there is a small number compared to what we actually have in terms of a potential. For us to have an idea, the almost 14 gigawatts that we have in distributed generation are spread among 1.4 million consumer units in Brazil. And we actually have 88 million consumer units in the country. So you see that there is enough potential for us to keep on growing. Globally, the space of Brazil has posed us in 13th position last year in terms of cumulative capacity until 2021, but we expect to finish this year around 10th or 9th position in the graph. So jumping up quite some positions due to the pace. An interesting thing, just coming back quickly to this graph, is that only next year, we will deploy 3 to 4 gigawatts of centralized solar from auctions that are already hired in the country. So that's also a projection that will bring the country to keep on growing. This, of course, has several benefits for our society that I don't think I need to go very much in depth here, but I think the one that has been very keen towards public policy development and that it's supporting this kind of policies, not only from federal, state, but also from state level, is job creations. And we need to have in mind that during the past 2 years, Brazil faced one of the biggest unemployment rates of its story. So, and during those years, solar sector, pandemic years, the solar sector was one of the few sectors of economy that kept a higher growing pace than previously to the pandemic. So that, of course, also called government to pay more attention to the sector, thus also enforcing the law that we had this year. So as I've mentioned before, in January this year, we achieved a framework for the solar sector in the country, and that provided us more stability and more security, also attracting more investments for the segment, but also posing a challenge, which is for us to try to forecast how will the market respond for a shift in the model, as I mentioned, from net metering to net billing. Although our estimates in the association show that this shift would only increase payback of the rooftop solar in around 6 months, so not enough to hold down solar development in the country. That's just a bit of how we work. What we see now in terms of expansion, it's a lot of interest growing to community solar, which I also think it's positive as it allows more democratization of access. But of course, it poses a different challenge when we talk about grid usage and how solar actually affects the power system, which is in a much higher way, for example, than if you consider a rooftop solar model. So try to go quickly because I think I already took some time before. I just wanted to thank you for being here with me and also invite those of you who already don't know AB Solar to get to know us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Barbara. Now it's time to Peru. Brendan, take the floor.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I'll try to keep it within the 8 minutes. Just to introduce myself, I'm Brendan Oviedo. I'm currently the president of the Peruvian Association of Renewable Energy. And also I'm coordinating this association of renewable energy associations in Ibero-America, which includes basically Latin America and Spain. We're currently 17 associations of 12 countries in Ibero-America. So yes, and we're called Red REN. So yes, and basically going in very quickly to Peru. Peru has an extraordinary quantity of resources. This is not limited in mining, but also ranges in natural resources, renewable energy resources. We have this also includes both solar and wind and hydro. Our potential in solar is very similar or equal to the potential that exists in the north of Chile. We have it in the south of Peru. Our levels of our ranges of potential in solar go between 8 and 8.5 kilowatt hour square meter. And this basically is in the southern node of Peru, the southern region of Peru. Currently, our legal framework is in a transition. The Ministry of Energy and Mines has a few months ago have published regulation that is currently being discussed to open the market up for renewables. Currently we have a legal framework which has been the basis for all the renewable energy projects in operation to date. Basically, this was a contractual framework which awarded a tender framework which awarded contracts between 18 and 20 years, where it guaranteed a specific price for all the energy that was offered in a specific bid. The price was composed by two different components. The first component was the marginal cost or spot price. We pay all generators in the market. And in order to meet the guaranteed price, the marginal cost or spot market price was covered. The difference between the marginal cost and the awarded price was covered by a regulated tariff called the prime. So yearly, all the energy that was awarded would be valuated and paid by the guaranteed price awarded in the tender. Very, very secure contract. In Peru, there is, for the last 30 years, legal stability and contractual security. And basically, none of these contracts have generated a default when the projects have been operational. There's basically been 707 megawatts of installed capacity awarded here in these tenders, but we'll see how the market is currently developing. And in Peru, I think the stone that is enabling a larger development of the resources and the potential resources we have in solar is called firm capacity. Generators in the market only can contract their firm capacity. If they don't have firm capacity, they have to buy it from third-party generators in order to enable them to execute energy sales. So what happens here is that in order to be acknowledged, a solar be acknowledged firm capacity, you would need to operate between 7 and probably 9 o'clock p.m., which is basically where the maximum demand occurs in Peru. Okay, and occurs legally, because in Peru, the maximum demand of the system is occurring outside the peak hours, which range between 5 o'clock and 11 o'clock p.m. However, legally, the entity that declares the maximum demand cannot declare it outside peak hours. So we're legally binded to acknowledge, or contrario sensu, not acknowledge the capability of the reliability of solar contributing security to the system in different hours of the day, which are not considered within the peak hours. This is basically a graph of the results of the renewable energy auctions, which I mentioned, that granted these 80 to 20 year PPAs with guaranteed tariffs, which are paid yearly. And there was around 707 megawatts. There's been expansions of the projects, so it's currently larger now. Yes, and the prices have followed all the tendencies, international tendencies of decrease in wind and solar. These are the current plants in operation. We have around 285 megawatts of installed capacity, representing around an estimated investment of 598 million, and representing an estimated 1,455 jobs. What is the pending legal framework? As I commented earlier, we have a barrier in the market to introduce more renewables into the market, which is basically not only the firm capacity, but also the possibility of being able to award contracts with the efficiency of reflecting the efficiency of costs of solar and wind. Specifically solar, they're not acknowledged from capacity. So what the Ministry of Energy and Mines in Peru has proposed in this so solar and wind can participate with all their actual price, and separating power from energy, which means that basically the restriction of counting with firm energy in order to counting with firm power capacity to sell energy will no longer exist, and therefore solar and wind projects, specifically solar, can submit bids of all the energy they could contractually comply with or supply to the system according to the contracts they would be bidding for. Another proposal is that these need to be long-term contracts, 15 years, as it is in Chile. In Peru, all the financings of, all the financings of these projects have had a credit contract term of 15 years. So that's why they've tried to reflect that term also in the proposals that need to be introduced into the tender system. We already have regulation for tendering contracts for distribution companies. So distribution companies in Peru tender contracts for their regulated and unregulated consumers within their concession. So basically what we're looking for is to introduce these changes, separate capacity and energy in order so that the solar project developers can bid all the energy they can according to the capabilities of the project, plus creating hourly blocks, which I think will transfer the efficiencies of the solar projects. And so basically, the potential of investment is around, falls short of 10 billion. And we've estimated around 52,000 jobs that would be created in this, if all this investment is implemented in Peru. Under development, and for clear numbers, we have around 13 gigawatts of installed capacity. Our demand is a little bit larger than 7 gigawatts. We have currently under development in studies and approved pre-operational system studies. These are the studies you need to undertake and get approved in order to connect to the system. We have around 10,422 megawatts. So you can understand the dimension of what is happening in Peru and the expectation that these investments are going to really be implemented, and that regulatory framework is going to change in order just to enable this investment. So basically, it's much more than the current demand we have in Peru. Just a quick mention before I close. We do not have regulation for distributed generation. This is a sensitive issue. This distributed generation as a concept was created in 2006 with this second reform law we had. And in principle, the regulation for distributed generation should have been approved in 2006. So I would take the opportunity of this platform to invoke the Ministry of Energy and Mines to basically move forward in approving the rules that would implement distributed generation. There's already been 4 drafts of this regulation, but we still don't have any approved regulation. We know they're working. We know they have something in draft, but we need to push forward because the potential of cost reduction and resource in Peru is enormous for distribution generation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's go. Okay, thank you very much for your very interesting and very comprehensive speech of everyone. There is some question from your side.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Constanza Levican from Chile, and I have a question for the last panelist. He said that they want to eliminate this differentiation between the pay for the installed capacity and the payment for the energy. I want to understand more about why it works this way right now and what will be the difference if you eliminate this.
Thank you for the question. It's not the payment system. Payment would be payment of capacity is almost follows regulation. The issue is that we have through regulation the need to sell the same amount of energy that we have from capacity. So as variable technologies such as solar are not available to contribute to security in peak hours, notwithstanding that maximum demand presents probably 4 or 5 times a year outside peak hours, which is contradictory. It should be when it really takes place. So then we will basically solar is the average of the solar firm capacity that has been acknowledged is 0.1. So with 0.1, you can't back any energy. So you would have to turn around to incumbent generators to ask them to sell some firm capacity so you can back the energy you need to sell in order to bank your project. And that doesn't take place.
Thank you, Rene. Another question from the public? Yes, Lars.
Hi, that was very interesting. I have a question for Barbara. At the end of the year in Brazil, there's going to be fees to be able to add energy to the grid by distributed PV. How do you think that will affect future growth in the distributed market?
Yes, thank you for your question, Lars. We will implement such fees as of January next year, and I think they have a real effect that it's different from the effect that the market expects it to have. Because the discussion on implementing these fees has been going on for such a long time in the country, what we have now, it's the majority of installers, PV installers, expect such fees to actually have a huge impact in payback. And this is reaching media and communication, and the effect that it has is that it actually frightens the consumer. So I think if this branch of communication continues, we might see some impact in the first months because of the reaction that the consumer will have because of the fees. But the studies that we have been carrying out in AB Solar show that the impact won't be higher than an increase, depending on the generation, of around 6 to 8 months of payback in terms of rooftop solar. If we're talking, for example, about community solar, the impact can be a bit bigger because you have no simultaneity effect. But we don't expect it to slow down the market, but we are indeed a bit worried on how media is communicating the matter.
Another question? No question, no doubt. Anybody? Okay, then it's my turn to do some question to you. We are. Okay. Oh, that's another thing. And I would like to know from you, what is your, close a little bit, what is your image of the future of the PV in your country in the short term and in the long term? And what is the major barrier for this forecast that you do? Marcelo?
Thank you. In the short term, I see PPAs between privates because it's the only way of signing something in Argentina with a current and risk of exchange rate and inflation. PPAs for short term in American dollars is the way that they are moving right now, Argentina. Next couple 2 years will be in that way. We have elections next year and the new government in 2024. Every one possible candidates will be more friendly to renewables than the present ones. And as a result of that, I see in the medium term more an expectation of growing more intensive in distributed generation, mainly in the first experiment regarding the big cities, agro PV, and offline water pumping will be the main niche of market in 5 years long. Of course, storage will be accomplished work. We are starting next year with the first contract with the storage in order to replace fossil fuel delivery at the ultra high prices. And in the long term, I think Argentina will be one of the most important countries around agro PV. It's a key issue for Argentina, agro PV. That's in case of Argentina.
Yeah, I think the main driver that is limiting investment in renewables is basically regulatory. Currently, there is more than $700 million being invested by private companies without a structure that would enable compensation. There are companies that are betting on the country and expecting that when probably the projects are in a situation or operational situation, then they will have the means of engaging in a PPA. And we basically, the potential is there, the legal and economic conditions are there. Peru has always been characterized to have a clear separation between economic policy and I don't know, governmental participation in policy. Like the Ministry of Economy works the macro stuff of the country separate to whatever the politicians do, which is good considering our context, our Latin American context. Yes, we're very solid macroeconomically. So I think we need to push the regulatory changes in order to enable the huge funds of flow that are awaiting these conditions in order to be injected into Peru.
Thank you. For short term, I think we expect solar to keep on being more prominent in distributed generation. And in the sense, we see a big raise in terms of commercial users and also agro-photovoltaic users. This has been growing a lot, especially due to finance available for such consumers. I think this is where we see the trend going. And in the long term, I think we will shift a bit using solar, not only in terms of net metering, but also for consumers that are in the free market. Brazil is undergoing a major discussion towards having a full market opening in around 6 to 8 years. And those consumers in the free market in Brazil will also be allowed to produce their own energy under other regulations. And solar there is already growing. So I think this is a big space for solar as well. Of course, regulation is always a huge issue. And I think because we are in the short term, because we will see in the next year such a big shift in government, I think there's also an effect on how market will react to that in terms of country risk and analyzing, but also in terms of currency, which affects a lot. 80% of our solar systems in Brazil are still imported. But for the long term, we also see Brazil becoming a Latin hub for producing of equipments. In the sense, it's important to flag because I think it's huge for the country that last month we had the launch in the country of the biggest solar modules factory of Latin America, with a capability of producing 600 megawatts of solar panels in a year. And there's a second one being built. So that's also where we see the sector turning in our country.
Thank you, Barbara. In fact, this is a big issue now to do one more decentralized production of panels. Seeing this unfortunate situation that we live, all these topics that we live the whole day. Okay, I think we can allow us a last question. Very quick. Agree with your experience in your countries. If you want to give one advice, only one, to the other Latin American countries that still have not developed this PV market, what would be this advice?
I was thinking of the response. If I had one advice, and considering our experience, I think this is if you don't have a market, this is a change of understanding of your concept of the future. If this future is conceived as a future as we've been living for the last century, then you won't understand what we need to do here. We're looking for changing the future of the economy. I think it's a bit lyrical, but changing the future of the economy from a consumption-based economy to a more sustainable economy. And that is achieved, or that will be achieved with a massive introduction of renewable energy, specifically solar, because we need to consider and safeguard the environmental integrity principle, which needs to reflect or interconnect between all the renewable that consider as a source of as a source of supply, all renewable energy with electromobility, green hydrogen, and basically the electrification of the economy. So that's why renewable energy, and specifically solar, is the main I don't know how to say, the main link between these efforts. And so my advice is we need to go to this is a change of mentality. So this needs a lot of work by academy and capacitation in every single level of the society and the economy, and mainly politicians, because these are the people that take the decisions, and you need both the people that will request or demand the politicians for a change, and the politicians that basically take the decisions. So that would be my advice.
I had a couple of minutes to think about, and I think that the main advice will be not to replicate the mistakes in other countries. Learn about the other experience and how to be more efficient, more smarter, more cheaper, more quicker. And secondly, in terms, just not country by country, in terms of the global situation, I think that the discussion in the coming years will be the model of our administration of energy. We are using an ancient model of administration energy for other sources. We have non-regular ones. We need to predict the variability, and we will have a storage, and we have to switch the model of administration in order to reduce the power reserve, in order to have a better system, quicker and cleaner. And we had to change our way of thinking the energy system. It's a challenge for us and for the rest of the system. We are creating work, we are cleaning the matrix, but we have to ask permission to do that. We have to switch the model, not only the technology. That is my point of view.
Thank you, Marcelo.
After such good advices, I think what I would add is that if such country hasn't yet developed the sector, what I would say is maybe take a step back and also look towards energy efficiency before not only looking towards shifting the energy matrix, because I think that's a point that we see lacking in several countries, maybe because it might be more challenging for governments to publicize measures that involve taking things away instead of building new things. But I think it's essential for sustainability of our overall planet. And also bearing in mind that the energy transition is an unnegotiable trend that we have for the future, and that investing in solar, especially decentralized solar, it's not only about shifting the energy production in your country, is about empowering people if you do it the right way, especially with capacity building. So I think that would be the main aspects I would take into.
Thank you very much, Barbara. I like your sentence. Energy transition is not negotiable for the future of the Earth. I use that in the future. Thank you to everybody. Thank you for the public. And we'll see you in the next show.